library.
I met Timothea years ago and was very impressed with her then, and then she kind of disappeared, and I don't know where she went. But she returned, and I saw a show she had not too long ago at Bob Graham's old studio that she had, and it was just wonderful. I was so impressed seeing this work. And so I asked her to have a show here, and tonight we're going to ask her what she's all about. So welcome, Timothea, and welcome all of you for coming. Thank you for coming.
Hello.
Where did you go when we lost you?
Well, that's a long journey, but so where did I go? For one thing, can you all hear me? Can you hear us? Okay. I had an art gallery in the 70s, 76, on La Cienega. It was the old Rico Mizuno Gallery. I got it from Larry Gagosian, who was just starting off in his journey, and did a show of Wallace Berman at the time. And my life radically changed and went on an inner spiritual journey, and sold the gallery, and my life took another direction for over 40 years. I was studying with something called the Movement of Spiritual Inner Awareness about soul transcendence. And growing up as an atheist, both parents, I had to have such experiences that really questioned my thoughts and philosophies, but it had to hit me over the head, the experiences, and it did. I was about 2 years of coincidences that I couldn't explain, and just a lot of inner things that took me on a journey. So I could say a lot more, but that's the gist of it. So I was an art world dropout.
And what brought you back?
Well, I love your questions. What brought me back was I took a course that had to do with spiritual masters. And you write a report, you pick somebody, I pick somebody in the beginning of the Bible back thousands of years. And you really kind of relate to them, you research them, etc., and end up giving an oral report. Well, I got a visual report, not a visual visitation. And they were energy fields. And I realized, I literally, excuse the French, said, oh shit, I have to paint this. And I went and awkwardly bought paintings, easel, felt foolish at first, and painted some paintings, spent a lot of time and energy, and there was a very live process that went on with doing this. When I finished the painting, which was about 4 feet, I had to do it bigger. It was like the energy wanted to be bigger. So then these 6-foot paintings, not those 3, but similar ones, and they're kind of light columns, fields of light, and they were so joyful to do. I was amazed because I had before 76, I had in the late 60s a scholarship for a painting studio in Paris. And I lived at a place called the Cité des Arts, right on across from Ile Saint-Louis. And I had that for 2 years. In fact, I have some of the painting, which I thought I would share, a few of them from that period. And then, I had the studio in Paris, and then I had one parent die, and soon after another, and life take me back to the United States. But that was the period when the coincidences were going on and things that were happening daily that I couldn't account for logically, which bothered my atheist self. And that brought me back to the States, and then not too long after, I did art consulting work. I stopped painting, and I was married to a musician. That changed, so a lot of things shifted. And I came back to the United States, had the art gallery, and then this spiritual journey.
In a group I'm in, we say that it's a minor miracle where God chooses to remain anonymous, a coincidence.
Yeah.
Your dad was a famous man, Bart Lytton. He had the Savings and Loans, and he was a close friend of John Kennedy's and Getty's. But the thing that impressed me, he always helped artists.
He did.
He had that storage unit on Sunset and Crescent Heights, and we all knew about that, where we could go see art. And what was it like growing up with him?
Whoa, that's quite a question.
That's what they're here for.
Yeah. So, let's see. That storage unit was Lytton's savings, and it's going to be demolished, and a Frank Gehry building's going to go there, but it's still there. And it was built in the 60s. It was kind of revolutionary bank building, modern glass, reinforced concrete roof. My father was a blacklisted screenwriter, and we lived in downtown LA. And he went through really hard times, had a nervous breakdown, et cetera, et cetera. And then he had this genius that came about when I was about, he had the genius the whole time, but it manifested in business and as a promoter. He was kind of a Barnum and Bailey character, very extrovert, very out there, very creative, and he loved art. And when he was one of the people that started with the LA County Museum in the very beginning, and had donated a wing that later he couldn't totally pay for, so it became the Hammer Wing, but it was the Lytton Hall. And so when he had a difference having to do, my memory is he had a difference that LA County didn't want to show as many young artists as he wanted to see done. So he built a center on the Savings and Loan, curated it. Josine Starles curated it, had a film, like a cinematheque, showed old films, and did all that, which is pretty amazing, and supported young artists. We didn't always agree on taste. We didn't agree on different things, but he was a very engaged politically. I remember when meeting Kennedy, he came over to the house when he was senator, and my parents wanted me to meet him and be there, and no, and I ended up doing that. I was 15. Wow. And then my father threw a big party, inauguration party, and went to that. So wonderful things. But what he would do is he would tent the backyard, which was in Holmby Hills at that point, off and throw these 1,000-people parties, and he'd go around with a mic, and he would narrate and MC and talk. And he was, many stories, quite a character, and did a lot of good.
You call this show Portals and Mortals.
Yeah. These paintings, other people told me, seemed like portals into another place. And I didn't say I'm going to create portals but they took me to another place. And then when other people had the same experience, that was that's the best as an artist. And so that's the portals. And there are different energetic forms, but they were joyful because of a communication with someplace else. And I think I started to talk about Paris before, going back to it. There was a joy in what I did, but there was a lot of perfectionism and uptight and mental torture. And these paintings haven't been that way. They're like a dance or a puzzle, and they come together in a surprisingly joyful way. And that surprised me. It was definitely a different creative process. The mortals back there, oh, Herb, I was married to him. We lived in Spain. Herb's a fabulous musician and classical guitarist. We were there. He was studying with the assistant to Andres Segovia. And I was 22. And these drawings, actually, I realized they came about in a similar way. They weren't pre-thought. They were just created. And when I thought about this show, too, I thought, there are different places I was in consciousness. And those mortals reflected a lot of human feelings and relationships and connections. And the portals are more about pure energy and another time and another place. And then I might add, at this point, the Paris period, which were another iteration of expression, because painting, from as far back as I can remember, 2 years old, my father's manuscripts, him trying to write, and I was drawing. I mean, it was a way to get out feelings that I couldn't get out some other way, as was dance. Those two things were like my safety valve. And the Paris paintings, a bit surreal, and but it was my inner world at the time, and I think influenced by having done sculpture at the Beaux-Arts in Paris, in wood, for a year, and also a lot of biology at Stanford. A lot of biology and science, but that influenced me. These are oils.
It's beautiful.
And there's just a couple, but I brought them in because it seemed to be part of the story.
Wow, these are beautiful.
Yeah. So this is called Shining the Light. Hi, Larry. Couple more. But they're part of the journey. And this one's called Remnants in Time.
How much are those? No.
I love Molly. And this another one. And there are more, but I just brought what was easy. And there's a whole series of drawings from that period. So that was another stage.
Timothea, somebody came in the other day, one of the students actually
Yeah.
here at the school, and said it's almost seasonal. Like you come in and the first 3 or 4 are all the colors of spring. And then you get into a darker period, and then you get into summer. Did you have a plan of that? Any idea of that?
No, not. Part of it is how you hung the show and curated it. The most, not having to do with this. I mean, there are different seasons. You could metaphorically say there are different seasons of. But the most recent one is that one, the themes, like, sometimes they come back in because it's timed energetically to do that. And that's called Rise and Shine. And then that one over there, the blue kind of one, is called Christmas at Midnight. And, and a friend of mine came to the opening who's a Chinese medicine doctor and energy worker, and he went in a long description of the ways the energy was moving in that, which was really nice that he had that experience.
What does the vortex mean to you?
It's a spiral of light. I actually was in a seminar in London when I did some drawings that were just ink drawings. And then the paintings came after that. To me, they move and they lift. I don't know, everybody has their own experience, but they're spirals of light. I think some of the colors and that, it's not pre-thought, but just work with the nervous system and work. I had another healer friend say that they're healing for people. So I don't know.
Who was the most important person in your life? Most important influence?
Artistically, or
because
yeah.
It's your choice.
Well, I'll say, the most important person probably in my life, besides the effect of my parents and my love for them, is the man I studied with spiritually, John Roger, for many years and still do. He's no longer living. What can I say in a short way about it? I think because after meeting him, and he wasn't like a guru, there was an energy field of loving and expansion that went beyond anything I had experienced. And so I was pulled into that journey and traveled with him and a group of people and learned certain aura balances and kind of woo-woo work out there. And my life just took a very different direction at that meeting. And I remember the first night I went to a seminar, and I was there, and a little bit, it was strange. I had a friend who did this strange spiritual thing. I mean, I was not in a conscious seeker, but I looked around, and the people had their eyes closed, and I guess they were meditating. It's not something I did at the time. I remember having the thought, whatever, they know something I don't know, and I need to know that. Okay. And that has drawn me ever since, except I know more of what they knew. And it was an inner journey. It was like even traveling with him, it wasn't about a man. It was about an energy field and the inner, in the dream state, etc., places it took me.
Talk about energy.
Talk about energy. I'm feeling energy. In what way?
How you feel about it. You've talked a lot about how the paintings
I think
energize.
Yeah, the color.
And other people who look at them feel the same way.
The color, it's kind of like I analyze them afterwards. I don't, there's a vibration, it's almost musical, that forms a harmonic and a rhythm. It's hard to put into words, but in a way, I haven't thought of this before, but it's dancing. It's energetically dancing inside. And I find, these forms that are kind of, I did a lot of abstract free painting. So I thought, is this, but it's very free. And it's as if the form dictates being organized this way. Even the colors, some of their paintings aren't here, the first ones I did. They're big. They're called Cheops, Saqqara, and Dendera, and that I've been to Egypt like 10 times, and but the colors are even more brash, and part of me went like that. They're not subtle colors, and yet I couldn't change them. They had to be that way. It was like, no, they're to be that way. So it's been a very interesting dialogue. In a very different way. Here's another powerful influence. Of all the painters, there are many painters and sculptors that I love. And you asked me some other time, who were your influences or what. When I went to the Pasadena Pagoda Museum when I was 12, my mother took me there, and there was the Gilkishire collection of German Expressionists, lit like jewels. And I walked in there and saw Klee, Kandinsky, Yavolinsky. There was also Feininger and Mark, and I was just knocked out. And the one person, probably Klee and Yavolinsky, but it was Yavolinsky who really affected me. And I think the color, it was only years later when I read about him, I understood the deeper connection. And he did this meditations late in life. His hands were arthritic, and he could only paint these small paintings, and he couldn't do certain forms, but they're very beautiful because they expressed something that's at the core of my experience in me. So Yavolinsky may be seen as an expressionist who took these principles furthest, guided by the conviction that the artist has to say with his art by means of forms and colors that which is divine within him. It states very eloquently my own feelings. To overcome the acute pain he was in, he had to achieve a mental state that went beyond the pain. So Yavolinsky wrote in his final abstract heads and meditation, "I'm working for me, only for me and my God. My work is my prayer, but a passionate prayer spoken with colors." Yeah, it gets me. And my art is merely meditation or prayer in colors. The meditations are Yavolinsky's final evidence of his lifelong inner dialogue with God. And here he is speaking to God the Father as the creator of the infinite, with which he is prepared to fuse his soul.